Welcome to another episode of the wrap up of Microsoft Ignite with regarding 365. And today we're talking with Sarah Haase. And Sarah, it's really cool to be able to connect with you and try and you know do this in the virtual sense. I know it's difficult, but it's also well worth it to connect with you and with other people.
Absolutely. It's great to be here and it's great to be able to be connected, even though we're in two very far distant corners of the globe. So happy to be here. And it was great getting to talk with you at Ignite
Yeah.
and throughout the week.
Yeah, look, that's a good comment too. It's the part that's really missing for Microsoft Ignite is how to create that side chat connection
Yeah.
experience, and we seem to be able to do it with like a side Teams meeting and having a watch party across all the different
Mhm.
sessions we were trying to watch. It kind of worked.
Yes.
Yeah.
It did kind of work. And it wasn't, we got a few people on here and there. And sometimes it was just seeing someone on video that was muted while we're watching a session on the other monitor. But it also helped that you and I got to deliver a table talk together. So we got some pre Ignite time as we were planning that
Yeah.
and some fun time on that session. So I feel like that was a set of great opportunities.
Definitely.
It
So
was
we
fun.
will continue to try and do that. But today, you're keen to tell us a bit about the impacts of Viva Connections and what you saw at Ignite of that.
Yeah, so I was really excited about Viva Connections. And just as a very quick intro, so Viva Connections is really that gateway experience to be able to have that employee experience that's brought into Microsoft Teams, utilizing a SharePoint home site, as well as other capabilities, including things like Yammer and Stream and other elements to be able to really bring everyone a home landing site experience within Microsoft Teams where they can engage with your company content and see your company's brand, logo, identity, and colors, and really create that sense of virtual or hybrid community, especially for those organizations that are not back to working in person side by side.
So Viva in general was released, went general availability, and they came up with a bundle of things.
Mhm.
And Viva Connections,
Mhm.
I think, was one of the first that came out the door. And initially, it was just here's your site within Teams, here's
Mhm.
some global navigation. But what did you see more of during Ignite sessions that they talked about the vision of connections and maybe a roadmap?
And where it's going. Yeah. So they had a lot of great announcements. So they are releasing now the Viva Connections mobile app is GA. So that's been very recent, I think, in fact, this month. They also talked about a couple of great new SharePoint web parts that you can add to your SharePoint home site, the dashboard and the feed web part. And the feed web part is where you can see things like SharePoint online news articles and announcements from Yammer, all company announcements, announcements from Yammer communities that I have joined and that I follow will show up in this feed concept in Viva Connections. You can actually add that feed as a web part to your SharePoint home site. And then they also have this interactive dashboard that uses adaptive cards and it can connect to systems like Workday or ServiceNow, but also to custom in-house applications that you have using these adaptive cards where you could, for example, submit a request for time off, or you could complete a quarterly touch-based checkpoint with your employees in Workday, things like that in this adaptive card interface using that dashboard web part in SharePoint. So I think that those are going to be some really great additions, as well as the whole Viva Connections mobile app, which takes the experience beyond Teams desktop app and Teams in the browser to really having that mobile experience for your employees and driving that employee engagement.
Yeah, look, I like the consistency across being in the browser and being able to see a company feed of items that
Mhm.
are relevant to you and then seeing the same thing in the mobile. And look, we're already having early customers benefit and see the potential of the company feed that, oh, we really are using Yammer a lot. Wow, there's a lot of conversations going on here that are quite interesting. Um,
Right.
so, like, one thing that I want to ask you too is like, if you're thinking about where this might fit on a SharePoint page, so years and years, it's been about what can we put on the page that is relevant to people to make them want to come and use it, but also that they can see their own content. What are your thoughts on where the Viva Connections web parts might sit on a page?
Well, I think that that's really interesting because I think it's more important than ever that you think about the layout, you think about what's above the fold, what's below the fold, how people are accessing things on their mobile device or on their computer, and what the resolution or monitor size is. And I think it's really important. I always go back to the same thing. You want to make content that is compelling, that's dynamic, that's ever changing, but you don't want to just make it flashy, because flashy alone isn't going to keep people coming back. Because let's be honest, back in the day, a lot of our intranets focused on what's being served in the cafeteria for lunch today was the most popular item on the intranet, along with what's today's weather in all of our different locations. And those types of things are really not relevant anymore, right? So I think that we need to keep it current, keep it fresh, and have a level of understanding of your company culture, the kinds of content and interactions that matter to your employees, and how you foster that. So it could look very different for different organizations and their purposes.
God, I definitely agree. And I think what the feed is going to do is going to make some of that easier as long as you're focused on telling your story in whatever platform
Mhm.
it is. If it's making a micro blog in Yammer, or encouraging more people to use SharePoint News, or record a video and drop it in the news stream,
Mhm.
then that's great too. It'll bubble up and appear there. Um, but yeah, around the dashboard, that's
Mhm.
an interesting space too. That you mentioned there's integrations into Workday and some things that are available out of the box. Um, how do you feel that's going to make an impact on people's days as they start, as they fire up their mobile and see some of these nudges?
Yeah, these interactions, I think it's going to be interesting because when you look at that dashboard experience in these adaptive cards, I think it's going to really companies are going to have to look at how can we add on to the out of the box functions? How can we enhance those adaptive cards? How can we develop things that are cool for our employees from an employee point of view, right? How can we make it dynamic and changing? Because having a series of tiles that flip isn't enough, right? They have to be meaningful tiles, and they have to be
Mm,
something that the employee would click on and make it easier for them in a wayfinding experience than for them to think about going out elsewhere and looking at the same thing. So I love the fact that they have the dashboard and feed web parts. The one thing that I would advise companies to think about is just because you can turn it on doesn't mean that it's necessarily ready for prime time. So I
mm,
think that it's important to think about what you have built in, how you can leverage that effectively, and know when is the right time to turn it on. Because once you have that impression for the employees, if they have a great impression, awesome. If they don't have a great impression of what you have built into those adaptive cards in that dashboard, are they going to come back and give it more of a look later,
mm.
months later? Maybe not. So I think it's important to think about when is the right time to lean in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, one approach that we're taking as we work with customers is to try and create adaptive cards that are targeted to certain audiences, just to give them the information that might prompt them to do something, or provide them a good start to the day. Look, going back to your cafeteria lunch example, imagine a card where there's maybe a vote or a poll on what should be the next good meal, if you know what I mean, and it just sort of drives that interaction. But
Right.
piloting that and getting two or three cards from your functional groups, your operational groups, to actually make that relevant, and then publishing it so that it is relevant to them, I think is a really good strategy to have.
I think it is, and a means of a driving employee engagement, right? Because you also, and this is where Yammer is so important. And you and I have had
Mm,
this conversation many times, and I still think Yammer doesn't get the love it deserves in general. I have found it to be an invaluable resource in the last 2 years as we are working separately and remotely, to be able to still have that dialogue, to still have that sense of community and camaraderie. And I think that as you look at things like Viva Connections, Yammer continues to be so well integrated, and it's going to become even more integrated with Viva Topics as well. And I think that if you are an organization who has licensing for Yammer but hasn't really looked at it, is unsure of where it really fits, it fits in this employee engagement space. It fits within Viva Connections. It fits as a component to enable people to find common interests and to be able to build connections with people that are not in their same geographic space, especially right now with hybrid and remote work. So that's the other thing that I think is really necessary. If you haven't taken another look at Yammer yet, it's past time to take another look.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've actually heard organizations that when they were rushing to try and enable this modern workplace for people as they went into pandemic and working remotely, that they were actually using Yammer communities to try and drive and organize that before bringing on other platforms. And because it was low friction, it was just drop this app on your phone, let's start a conversation. And look, seeing that kind of value then bubble up into the likes of Viva Connections, it becomes a pulse of, here's your news, here's a conversation around another news thing, and that feed becomes quite relevant. Another use case that we see too that works quite well is enabling frontline workers to have conversations about things that they care about. Again, low friction. It's a familiar experience to make a post, take a picture, record a video, respond to a campaign, and add your idea. Yeah, it's going to be great to see that bubbling up and it either be on your homepage or you can see it in your mobile.
That's right. I think it's going to be amazing. So definitely a lot here to think about. And I think employee engagement is such an important story. And I really liked at Ignite. They had several sessions on Viva and Viva Connections specifically. And I think that they did a great job highlighting that employee engagement is more important than ever, especially if we look at the volume with which people are looking at transitioning roles, transitioning companies, transitioning jobs. Employee engagement is more important than ever before. And we need all of the digital help that we can get to help bring people together and bring employees together.